Before we start the video, I want to give you guys a heads up that this will be the last review for the year. I will be back in January with a video called the top 3 best and worst animated movies of 2019. Now, let's get into the video. Warning, the subject of this review is meant for mature audiences. Viewer discretion is advised. Before we begin this review, I think it's important to address where we stand with the creator of what we're reviewing today. Ain't that right, Josh?
Absolutely essential.
Now, if you haven't heard by now, the once famed creator of Ren and Stimpy, John K., had been outed for partaking in illicit behavior.
Specifically, grooming young fans into sexual relationships that were abusive and destructive.
Indeed. As for me, I'm a fan of the guy's work. Let me repeat that. I am a fan of his work. The advice on his blog has helped my drawing a great deal.
I'm afraid I can't go with you there. I can't deny that he's been an influence on the way I think about animation, especially his theories about specific expressions, but I found at a certain point his blog was detrimental to my growth as an artist. His brutalist philosophy is basically that if you don't measure up to the greatest in history, you shouldn't be drawing, and that eroded the confidence of the sensitive young artist that I was. It's true that my drawings improved following the Preston Blair cartooning lessons he lauded so often on his blog, but here's the thing. John didn't make me a better artist. Hell, not even Preston Blair did. I became a better artist because I was actually sitting down and applying myself and putting in the study to become better.
Now, do we condone what he's done? Of course not. And while our deepest wishes go out to Robin Bird and Katie Rice, Josh and I are going to look at this as just another form of entertainment/artistic expression.
Even if it shows us old man ass?
Even if it shows us old man ass. What up, snitches? I'm the Animaniac.
And I'm the Martian.
And this is John Creasfolucci's Cans Without Labels. The cartoon's plot goes like this. George Liquor, American, makes his nephews, Slab and Ernie, eat something from a can without a label. The story behind this cartoon was inspired by real-life experiences. John's father, when he was growing up, would commonly buy off-label brand food from their local supermarket, which was relatively easy for him and his siblings to keep down, because at the same time, he would buy cans that were marked down as another way to feed his family for cheap. The cans he often got had something very disgusting inside them, but no matter what it was, John's father made him and his siblings eat what was inside. Hey Josh, could you technically report something like this to Child Protective Services in the 60s?
Probably not. I think everybody was eating nutritionally devoid slop back then. Plus a lot of abusive behavior such as beating your kids with belts was normalized back then. Weren't the 60s just great? What a nifty nostalgic time period.
When he finally got fed up dealing with television executives stifling his creative vision, he decided to launch a Kickstarter campaign to fund his cartoon in 2012. He asked for $110,000 to make it. He got over $130,000 from over 3,000 backers, and it was expected to come out in 2013. Of course, it came out 6 years past the expected date. So, what took him so long? Well, the following projects he did could be a contributing factor to the delay, like his countless bumpers for Cartoon Network's adult programming block, Adult Swim, promos for a UFC pay-per-view fight, one including Mike Judge starring George Liquor and Hank Hill, and producing visuals for Miley Cyrus to use on her Bangers tour.
I've got it on good authority that John paid for back surgery and treated himself to a European vacation not long after the funding goal was met. And it's not like the guy had scores of obligations keeping him from working on the short. No studio has wanted to work with him, even before he was busted for being a pedophile. Adult Swim gave him a couple of bumpers to make out of apparent pity.
And starting up a brand new animation studio in Florida in an attempt to bring jobs back to the States. Hey Josh, didn't you get offered one there?
Me? No, though at the time it would have been a dream come true. I was pretty deep in the John K. cult of personality and really wanted nothing more than for Daddy Creasfolucci to tell me I was a good artist. Now I wouldn't piss on him if he was on fire. I do know some artists who are going to work at the would-be studio. Some even moved countries for the opportunity. And then shortly afterwards the allegations came out and the plan was mothballed. I feel terrible for the talented artists who stake their futures on John's latest doomed enterprise. And to be clear, I'm not blaming the victims for speaking up. The blame rests with John and his pedophile behavior finally catching up with him. You know how your phone learns topics you're interested in and sends you news stories about those topics? Well, my phone slapped me awake and said, "Hey, that guy you love is a pedophile!" And I sat there in bed and read the whole article and went, "Oh no. Oh no. Oh no!"
Yeah, I was heartbroken too. What did you think this clip was for?
I won't go into all the allegations here, but I will repeat again in case you missed it. John Kay is a pedophile. If you want to read all the testimony for yourself, you can read the incredibly well-researched BuzzFeed article in the description. Kudos to the journalists and victims who spoke up. And I know some people have an attitude about BuzzFeed, but this is BuzzFeed News, which is a surprisingly legitimate news source, not to be confused with the main side with their "which pony are you" quizzes.
Or if you prefer listening to the story, Blame It on George did a fantastic video on the subject as well, called John Creasfalucci, An Open Secret. The link is in the iCard above.
What makes it extra disgusting to me is that the boys who are fans got the royal treatment. It's in them drawing manuals and signed art. He took Anthony to Disneyland. People see these public displays of generosity and think, what a great guy. Meanwhile, he'd offer the same treats and rewards to girls in exchange for sexual favors. And of course the girls thought it was incredible to be dating their hero who promised to help boost their careers, because of course they were too young to know it's completely fucked up for a middle-aged man to date a teenager.
It was 1992 for the man all over again. But it meant there was nothing to keep him from finally finishing the damn cartoon. It may be 6 years past its deadline, but it's here.
Right from the word go, everything is terrible. How about these JPEG artifacts in the opening title card he's reusing from Man's Best Friend? Or George's face scaling at a different rate than the rest of him during the opening fade-in? And it only gets worse from here if you can believe it. The constant sliding around of the camera serves no clear purpose except to make the audience sick.
And now hang on, there are at least 2 moments where I can see the camera shifting work to the short's benefit. Like with George Licker dealing with his nephews who refuse to eat the face. The way the camera moves, making the CG objects look like they are warping, gives the effect that his anger is distorting the house, which works in tandem with the non-backgrounds Ren and Stimpy was known for. Come to think of it, the sequence is very reminiscent of Ren's rant from Sven Hoek.
Oh, what I'm gonna do to you.
Oh, and the CG objects shifting around when Cigarettes the cat realizes the kids are feeding him something worse than garbage is effective too. But yeah, I'm with you for the rest of the cartoon in that department. The camera work showcases just how cheap it looks.
Like so many of John's projects, on paper it has the germ of a funny idea, but in execution it's full of technical errors and unintelligible character acting that more often than not makes it totally unclear what the characters are doing. Did you notice John's new trademark? He writes animation notes in and then forgets to erase them. You can see this in his bumpers and Simpsons shorts. The Danes call it lack of quality control.
I could understand what was going on and what each character was feeling in the cartoon. What I didn't like about it were the expressions being constantly extreme. For somebody who goes on and on about the varying degrees of a particular emotion, he doesn't seem to realize he created his own monotony in his recent work. Like, even Bob Clampett, his favorite Warner Brothers director, would have known when to restrain himself and when to go nuts. And no, I hadn't noticed he left in animation notes in his newer stuff. Damn. As for the technical errors, I think I know what you mean. Some of the dialogue, especially George Licker's, sounds like it was stitched together from multiple takes. I guess as this was Michael Pataki's last time voicing Licker before he died of cancer in 2010, he only had so much to work with. It's pretty sad to have one of your last projects be tied to someone who finally got caught with his little Johnny exposed, 9 years after you died. However, I did notice John tends to use more overbearing sound effects than required, like when Ernie tries to eat the face but finds it too repulsive to keep down. In that scene, I think he did it to compensate for the face not being as gross as his previous stuff, yet it's present everywhere else. While I'm on that same sequence, John tends to use dramatic stings a lot in this picture, and any other music you hear, if you're lucky, tends to go from upbeat and peaceful to intense and dramatic without a transition. At least, not one I heard.
I'll admit that I don't hate George Licker's design. when Bob Jakes or Mike Kim drew him on Ren and Stimpy as a bug-eyed, tightly wound blood sausage of a man, there was something funny and almost appealing about him. But here he's exaggerated to such a grotesque degree you really come away not liking him. Or any of these characters that move like single-celled organisms filled with wet goop. Get this screaming man without his pants away from me!
Looks like them and Chris Riccardi were the only people to make Licker look presentable. And here I thought Jim Smith, who did the layouts with John, could do no wrong. May Riccardi rest in peace.
It was a novelty when the Ren and Stimpy pilot substituted backgrounds for crazy color cards painted by Bob Camp, but personally I prefer the more grounded backgrounds of the later episodes. Bill Ray and Scott Wills would design color schemes that elevated the mood of everything. Seeing John Kay regress back to these abstract backgrounds is really insulting considering the amount of money he was given. It goes to show that he really has no new ideas. And the version I watched on YouTube, which I assume was ripped from the DVD, because those went out before the digital copy was made available to donors, unbelievably featured an ad at the end for a vegan chain restaurant. Now that's just insulting. For all his talk of giving the cartoon directly to the fans, he has the nerve to stick an ad at the end of the cartoon that's 6 years late. And it's nothing new, of course. It's the same warmed-over 50s nostalgia he's been peddling for his entire career. No new ideas, just the same thing devolved to puerility. And you know John doesn't believe in making an ad for a vegan place. Like most boomers, he's tied his eating of meat to his masculinity and has made many, many posts and even comics about eating meat being the manliest thing you can do. That sick old monkey's a sellout and a hypocrite.
Yeah, I remember seeing that bumper, but didn't think much of it. I think he removed it when he posted the cartoon to his YouTube channel. Don't subscribe to him. Alright, now, the improvements I'd make to the cartoon. Well, for starters, I'd alter Ernie's reaction to the canned face. You know how his head expands as well as his eyes? Why not have the rest of his body catch up to it and come back down into his chair? That'd be nice. Okay, this one is a minor thing, but shots of Licker leaving the kitchen when he goes to the bathroom and Slab and Ernie dashing away from the table and opening the door to see Donald Bastard couldn't hurt. Next would be to get someone to make a shot of the face looking grosser than it was in the picture. That way the overabundance of sound effects would be justified. Then during Ernie's attempt to eat the face, I'd pick music that's quietly intense, so that it transitions a little smoother and doesn't abruptly interrupt the tone of George screaming at the top of his lungs at them. Eat the fucking face! Which is my favorite expression in the cartoon. Cigarettes the cat eating at the table could be staged as one shot, or fewer shots if possible. The same goes for the Donald Bastard sequence. That way when he tears Slab's face off, it's more of a surprise when we see the kid without one, and John can cut down on making several shots. After Cigarettes refuses the face, Slab could kick him straight out of the doggy door instead of in an arc, then add in a cannon firing sound effect on his way out. Dude's made some unusual choices, like using a duck to work on a machine and that. Why not have a cannibal sound effect as a cat goes out the doggy door? When George Licker comes back out to see if they ate the face, he could come out in a black silhouette, then have the camera focus on the front side of the lower half of his body, just as a way to keep his ass out of our faces. Then combine the shots of Slab and Ernie feeling accomplished in front of their uncle, and George Licker sliding in to hug them. And finally, cap it off by adding the line, "Maybe we'll find a nice foot," when George decides to reward them with another can. It was in the unfinished version that leaked a few years back. I can't find it, probably because it's buried underneath every other video bashing this cartoon. And those are the changes I'd make. What about you?
Well, the tragedy to me, besides, the real-life tragedy, is that I think John has some good ideas. I used to read John's blog pretty religiously, and on paper, some of his ideas are great. It's in the execution that they fail. If John could have learned to be a more hands-off ideas man on Ren and Stimpy, and given the enormously talented crew the breathing room they needed, he could have had a great career ahead of him. I would have loved to see the George Licker program produced by the Ren and Stimpy crew. But John's obsessive perfectionism, controlling nature, abusive behavior, and general lack of professionalism saw him fired. Now, I'm relatively new to the animation industry, but one thing I know to be true in all entertainment industries is that you have to be good to work with. There are people I don't think are necessarily very good at what they do, but they fail upwards because they are warm, respectful, personable people. By the same token, I know artists who work alone online, who are certainly talented enough to work in the industry, but can't because they make people uncomfortable. You can make the biggest hit in the world, but if you have a reputation for being difficult to deal with, you aren't going to work. It's that simple.
Wise words from a future cartoon star right there. Cans Without Labels is a great letdown to what fans John had left. What good qualities I found were scarce, buried under the many problems the cartoon has. Its humor shot itself so much it's Swiss cheese. Its production is cheap, and its editing is obnoxious. George can give me the belt because this cartoon is maroonic schlock.
Even if you can divorce yourself from the context in which this cartoon was made, it's still a big disappointment. If any good is to come of this, you should consider becoming patrons of Robin Bird and Katie Rice's Patreons. Help support the women who were victimized by John after all the support we gave him over the years. And if you can't afford to give, then just don't support John K. Don't buy anything from him, don't donate to him. Hell, I don't even visit his blog to deny him the fraction of AdSense revenue he might be earning. The guy's had more second chances than I've had hot dinners, and he's proven himself unreliable time and again, but what he did to those girls was unforgivable. And before any of you devil's advocates jump to his defense, I'll remind you that if any regular person had been accused of these things, they'd go to jail. If the worst thing that happens to him is that he doesn't get to make cartoons anymore and has to retire, he's getting off easy. I will shed no tears for him.
Guys, what are your thoughts on this disaster piece of a cartoon? Comment below. You can follow the Martian on Twitter at Joshua Martian, and if you guys want to stay updated on future videos and see some cool artwork, be sure to follow me on Twitter, Facebook, Tumblr, and DeviantArt. The links are in the description, and if you want to be the first to know when a new video will be up, ring that bell after you subscribe. Thanks for watching, and hopefully next time Josh and I will talk about something good that isn't tied to anyone controversial. Want to go watch John scream in pain as he gets his ass kicked by a lifeguard?
Sure.
Hold still, you slimy crustacean!
Pull his lips off! Go for the groin! Crack his shell! Hit him! Boy, get that bastard!
I'm gonna break you, crab. Help! I'm gonna crack you like an egg. Pick on girls, will ya? You better not come back, you filthy scum! I hate your guts.